So I'm just going to read a tiny little piece of this book. All you need to know, the first chapter opens when Jason Fitger is sort of shoehorned by the provost of Payne University to lead a study abroad winter term in January. The second chapter consists entirely of the undergraduates' statements of interest. So, why they want to go to England, what they're up to. And this is one of those letters written by Felicity Babinek. Dear Experience Abroad Office, my name is Felicity Babinek, and I am applying for the Experience England program with Professor Lortimer in January. I took Survey of American History with Professor Lortimer last year and enjoyed it a lot. He did a magic show to make a point about the War of 1812 that was not like anything in a classroom I ever saw. In Payne, I am majoring in elementary education, kindergarten, or first grade. My interest in England is that it is a place where a lot of poets are from. I love to write poems, and sometimes I read them too when I have the time. Although I have never been out of the US, I am eager to set my foot in foreign lands. Seeing and understanding other cultures will be important to my teaching career. My personality is shy, but I am easy to get along with. I think that is one of my strengths. One of my weaknesses is I am not as brave as I should be. I will be nervous when the plane takes off, but that is something I am working on. Thanks. One final word about me is that I have never been away from Mrs. Gray. She is my cat. So other students offer their statements of interest too, including a disclosure of criminal activity from one of them, and another who mistakenly believes he is headed to the Caribbean rather than to London.
He was my favorite. I could see doing that. I have my little notes here on my phone, and when I was reading it, I wrote so many hilarious moments, and then I started noting them, and then I stopped because this book is so funny. So maybe my first question for you is about humor. It's so hard to capture, it's so hard to nail, and it's weird to talk about, I think. But can you talk about it?
Like, how do you about what we can't talk about? That's good. I think the weird thing is I don't consider myself a funny person. I can't tell a joke to save my life. I never remember an amusing anecdote. They just float out of my brain instantly. But I feel like Jason Fitger is funny. It's like I made this guy and he knows how to be funny in a way that I don't. He's in some ways kind of an evil little alter ego for me. Very cathartic thing to create, an evil version of yourself and let him loose in the world. But I don't know, just the way he looks at things, I think, is funny in a way that I don't feel like I personally know how to be.
But I disagree with you because
okay, let's do that.
So the book is, I never know like how much in the weeds to get with the actual book, because I don't know who's read it and who hasn't, but the book is structured through it's kind of the scaffolding is essays written, the essays that are due during the course of this 3-week program that the students write, and so each essay kind of slowly creates the character of the student who's writing the essays, and they're hilarious, and they're kind of warped, and some of them are really twisted, and that's not Fitger's humor, that's yours. I mean, it's yours too, but you know what I mean? That's like, so how do you, oh, and also, no, forget, I'll come back to that later. How did you do that? Like, I felt like in some ways, I feel like creating, like writing those essays was like making fun of study abroad students, young study abroad students, in a way could have been like shooting fish in a barrel, but you never take them down. I mean, the mockery is so gentle that it almost like you almost don't realize it until you're done reading the essay, and then you're like, oh, whoa, that was like a very painless cut.
Yeah, and I would think humor is an equal opportunity employer. I didn't want it to be, oh, let's make fun of these young students.
Yeah,
I thought,
right,
what's the point of that? That just seems like mean behavior. But to me, it's again Ficker's lens that sort of determines the whole thing. It's the way he looks at the students. It's the way he interacts with them, the way he sees and understands the writing that they turn in, the way he looks at his ex-wife and their relationship. It's this lens that he creates that sort of shines across the whole book. There are things he notices that I think, I don't know, are the things that make him amusing. There's a moment just in the first chapter when the provost is basically telling him, do you want me to cut off funding for your department, or are you going to do this? And he's trying not to cave. He really hates England. He doesn't want to go to England. But he just looks down at the rug and there's a bug climbing up the little fibers. It's a thick shag rug, the way people used to have. And this little insect is climbing up one fiber and down the next into the rug. And just the fact that he would be a person who notices that. He notices the strange, the weird details that surround him in a way that I think other people maybe don't. And sometimes I suppose I would notice the things that I give him to notice, but again, I don't say them out loud. There's so many things I'm allowed to give to him that I think, no, I wouldn't say that. But
have you ever been at the helm of the study abroad program yourself?
I have been. That was where this started, because I teach at the University of Minnesota, and I keep thinking to myself, how do I get a free trip to Europe? This is of course a scheme. And I did travel abroad. I was a Spanish major as an undergrad. I went to South America for a semester. I went to Mexico for a winter term. I was always trying to get out of northern Ohio in the winter and go somewhere else. So I just thought, this is a great thing for an undergrad. I feel like they should all go abroad. And University of Minnesota, we have lots of students from the Midwest. Many of them have never been out of the U.S. And so it's a big kind of scary deal for some of them.
Many of them have never left their cat.
Yeah, never left their cat behind. And so I just really wanted that to happen. So I devised a travel writing class, which allows me to take students to Spain. So the first time I did it, it was a January term. Fitger takes his students January to London. And we got to Madrid, it must have been late December, pre-New Year's. And when I got there, they said, oh, by the way, there isn't a classroom available to you. We thought there would be one, but oops, sorry, not until after the Three Kings Day, which is a big deal in Spain.
Is that like January 6th or something?
I think, yeah, January 6th, 7th. So I'm looking around and thinking, wait, it's December 27th. We don't have a classroom for the first week and a half. And by the way, you'll be in this hotel, but you can't have the conference room because there's a bunch of businessmen who are in there. And so the students just ran rampant around Madrid the whole time. I would periodically see them running down a hotel hallway and say, hey, do you have a, no, they were the next
So this
time,
is a rip from the headlines.
well, the next time I said, we have to have a classroom the whole time. We have to have a dormitory, for God's sake. And now I take them over spring break 1 week, and we have a dorm and a classroom. So, because it's not Three Kings Day anymore.
Probably something else.
But the whole time I was there, the first time in Spain, all I could think about was, what would Jason Fitger
Well,
think of
that's
this?
what I wanted to ask you. Like,
Oh,
that's
God, it was just, I thought I was done with him after the Shakespeare
Oh,
requirement. I thought, okay, 2 books with 1 character, that's probably one too many already. Done. But yeah, when I got on that plane, all I could think about was, what would he make of this experience?
So, okay, I want to ask this carefully, but how much is, I mean, I kind of
I
hate
know
this
where you're
question,
going.
just answer it. Like, how much is just straight, like, oh, you're just taking notes, you're just observing, taking dictation, and there it is in the book. Just tell us. We won't tell anyone.
There are very few details that I took from real life. I mean, first I moved it to England because I thought I really need to avoid the temptation to portray real people. I cannot be doing that. So my husband taught in Oxford for a semester, and I went with him, and I thought, I said it over here. This will be safer. I will not be tempted. But there were 1 or 2 details that I don't make much of in this book, but we got to the Minneapolis airport, the first time I took people. And again, a number of them had not been out of the country before, so they're nervous, justifiably. I've gone over the packing list, pack light, bring sensible shoes, no drugs, blah, blah, go through the whole,
Shoes, drugs, what else?
the whole, yeah, all the instructions. And behind me at security, TSA, I hear, "Ma'am, is this your daughter?" I said, "No, that's my student." And she's weeping. I think, "Oh my God, they brought drugs. I told them not to bring them." And no, she brought a taser with her. She had in her bag, and
For safety.
safety,
Oh,
because she
God.
said, "Well, I wasn't sure if it would be safe over there, so I bought it." I thought, "You bought it? Where do you buy a taser?" It never occurred to me anybody could buy a taser. And
Wow.
and then the girl behind her in line, we got in, funneled in separate lines, so I'd gone ahead. And girl behind her says, "Well, I have mace. Is that all right?" Oh, it just never dawned on me to say,
Well, I have
"Your mace and your
nunchucks. Is that
taser."
okay?
Yeah, I know, my sword, whatever. So, otherwise, I tried to leave real life alone.
That's impressive because I'm sure there were many, yeah.
Very tempting.
Which is a good segue to my next, I guess, kind of topic of conversation for us. Obviously, this is academic satire, and that's its own genre. And I was telling Julie earlier, my husband teaches at UWM and finds this genre like it hit too close to home. He came here and left
He left. He ran out the door.
because it's painful. It's so much of it is like the humor is masking the reality of how sort of dark academia has gotten. And first, okay, so I guess I maybe want to ask you where you feel like this trilogy fits in the genre of academic satire. Like I haven't read a ton of it, but like Moo and I don't know if you have watched The Chair on Netflix. I feel like that's a really good recent example that I was just by like, like that was like secondhand smoke to me. I was like, oh, I can't watch this one.
I couldn't watch it either.
It's with Sandra Oh, and it's just like everything falls apart. I mean, so I don't know. How did you feel like when you started this in whatever 10 years ago? Like, how did you feel like you're participating in this conversation?
Well, I didn't start out, dear committee members, I didn't start out thinking I'm going to write an academic satire. It really started as an experiment with form because I was trying to figure out, I had taken a big segue after my first novel years ago, 1995, and wrote 5 novels for younger readers, trying to teach myself how to plot. I'm not a person who's good at plot. I have trouble getting a character from A to B. So I thought, I'm going to write something for, a 10-year-old, and then I'll figure out how to do cause and effect and the things that, are maybe more evident in a novel for a younger reader. So I wrote those, and then my kids grew up, and I was like, oh, dang, I don't have an in-house audience anymore. So I thought maybe if I pick a structure first, and I'll just choose some familiar structure, I'll have it. It's like, I didn't want to play tennis without a net. I'd put the net up first and then figure out how to move the ball around. So it was really an experiment. I thought, well, it'll probably be terrible and I'll throw it out when I'm done, but at least it'll keep me busy during the summer when I wasn't teaching. And I wrote that book in 6 months. I was done. It was like a miracle. It was the easiest, quickest, most fun thing I'd ever written. Other things I've spent years banging my head against the wall, but that book was just fun.
Do you think that male writers are like, I knew it would be terrible and I'd throw it out after it? I mean, it's an amazing novel. I just own it.
Oh, thank you. But yeah, so now I've lost track of my question.
Sorry,
Where was I? No, it was me, not you.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about academic satire as a genre.
Oh yeah, because so that one, it ended up being an academic satire, and all the concerns that I have about, you just read the news now about arts and humanities. Simmons College in Boston just canceled all their language programs. West Virginia University basically eviscerated the humanities. Schools are just, if something's going to be cut at a university, it's going to be art, music, literature. That's what they're not cutting. The engineering programs, they're not cutting the chemistry labs. But I just feel like the arts and humanities are in danger. And that was something that I gave to Fitger to be angry about and worried about. So again, a sort of catharsis. I feel like, academia is so familiar to me. That's where I live. I'm there all the time. but mostly what I wanted him to be frustrated with and to be concerned with was this feeling that I think in the first book I say he feels like he's at the top of a roller coaster and it's on the way down. And it's scary. It's scary to think of what's happening to higher ed. And it's not as if universities are entirely to blame about this thing. Money is a huge issue. Student debt is a monstrosity. You don't want students coming out 50 grand in debt and getting a degree in poetry. What will they do? Parents are worried about it. Students are worried about it for good reason. So I don't know how we would fix it, but it worries me a lot.
Well, I mean, his worry is, again, it's funny because if you weren't laughing, you'd be sobbing. Which, I mean, I teared up at the end of this book. I won't give anything away, but I wasn't expecting to, because I was laughing the whole way through, and I actually got, you're walking a thin line, and you're doing.
I think a lot of humor isn't just humor.
Yeah.
It walks hand in hand with the dark and the light.
Right.
They go together. And even dear committee members, it was weird when I won the humor award for that book because I thought it's essentially a pretty sad book.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny on the moment to moment level, but for the overall arc, it's kind of depressing.
I was also amazed that you were the first woman to win that award.
Yeah, that was
so women can be funny.
Apparently so. It's amazing.
I did not know.
Well, they told me initially, this was years ago now, that I was one of 10 finalists for the Thurber. And immediately the press picks this up and says, oh, no woman has won the Thurber. Can women be funny? This sort of thing. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to have to win because after this kind of thing, they're going to have to give it to a woman. Then they narrowed it down to 3. They were all women.
Okay.
I thought, damn.
No, that's good.
Still had a 33% chance. But yeah, I went to New York. They had this little ceremony at a comedy club in New York City. And my daughter, who lives in New York, went with me. And Roz Chast was one of the other finalists for this book. Can't we talk about something more pleasant? It was this graphic memoir about her parents. And it was terrific. I adore Roz Chast.
So sad. Really sad.
Yeah. So I'm saying to my daughter, oh my God, that's Roz Chast. She's the one at the New Yorker. Remember the cartoon I sent you last week? Blah, blah, blah. I'm talking about it. And Roz Chast is trying to get the projector to show images from her book. And it's not working. Technology always breaks. So she's frustrated. And finally, she gets up there and she's making her presentation. And I'm filling my daughter in. She's saying, wait, who's Roz Chast? And I'm telling her, Roz Chast, blah, blah, blah. And then a few minutes go by and my daughter says, they just said you won. I'm like, what? I was still just gazing admiringly at Roz Chast. And they said, come on up and, make your speech. I'm like, speech? Oh my God.
Was it funny?
I didn't have a speech. No, I don't think I said much of anything.
That's
yeah,
amazing.
but it was great.
Who was the other?
Annabelle Gurwitch. She's a comedy writer from LA. She also does stand up. So she got up there and she looked like $1 million in this cool Los Angeles dress. And she was just somebody who could prance across a stage and be hilarious. I went up and gripped the podium with a death grip, blathered. I don't know what I said.
But that's funny too.
Yeah, maybe.
The sweat.
Inadvertently, yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to Fitger. Let's go back to him. I feel like I read Dear Committee Members when it came out, so it's been a while, but I feel like he changes through the course of these books. Can you maybe just take it from there and talk about that?
Yeah, I think he changes maybe a little bit over the course of each one. His baseline is to be crusty and cantankerous. He's a real pill in a lot of ways. I know a couple of readers have said to me, how did you want to work with this guy? He's so unpleasant. But
I did not find him unpleasant. I
think he's pleasant and unpleasant.
Yeah.
He can be winning despite himself. And it's much more interesting as a writer to deal with somebody's faults. If you create a Mother Teresa as a character, you think, well, what am I going to do with her? She's just leading a sainted existence, So the fact that he's got all these flaws is what makes him fun to write about.
But he kind of softens, right?
Yeah, I feel like his virtues shine out between the cracks and all those flaws. He cares about things that matter. It's just that he's a kind of a jerk while doing so. And yeah, I think over the course of each book, there's a sense that he's trying to learn something.
Or like in this one, learning something in spite of himself, kind of.
Yeah, usually in spite of himself. I mean, his ex-wife, Janet, tells him at the beginning of the book, you are not suited to do this, to lead a trip abroad. You are not the right person to do this. And he's sort of surprised at first, but she keeps saying to him, you hate traveling. You're a real stick in the mud. You don't even really like students. You don't really like people. And, you're going to be with them all the time. But he doesn't think of himself as much of a jerk as he is sometimes.
Well, likability is a trap. I mean,
It is,
honestly,
yeah.
like I feel like women writers especially get sort of, pilloried for characters that aren't likable, and it's like I try to write flawed characters whose flaws you understand and identify with. But who wants to write a likable character? I mean, that's boring.
It's boring. Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. So what did you learn about? I'm interested in plot selfishly because I have a hard time with it too. I feel like, so I know Julie from the University of Minnesota. She teaches there, and I got my graduate degree there. And my degree is in creative nonfiction. And I feel like I came out of there with like it was a gem of a program, and I learned so much. And I have so many. I'm still friends with so many people I worked with there, but I really didn't learn anything about plot. I guess
We didn't teach you a thing about it because we don't know anything about plot. Is
really
apparently the thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So what did you, I frequently read for plot, as I read a lot of young adult literature.
Yep.
Because it's like you said, that's like, I remember reading The Hunger Games and being like, oh,
Here's how it
I
works.
get it now. I mean, I got it as a reader, but not necessarily as a writer. But, so what you've done is really interesting and kind of, and ingenious. And what have you learned about plot? And subsequently, which you'll forget, but I'll remind you, my next question, what's next? Like, what do you do now?
I know that's
Sorry.
the trick. Well, the plot question, I feel like I did learn a lot about plot from writing the novels for younger readers. And I started out, the first one, I guess my kids were maybe 8 and 10. So and my older daughter was always a voracious reader. The younger one, you could not pay her to read a book. She would not. I would chase her around the house saying, look, it's about a horse. You
That
love
always works.
horses. No,
Just
she
read it.
just, did not want to sit and read anything. So I thought I will write something that maybe she would read, and I'll force her to read it, because I'm her mother. So I read Charlotte's Web, starts with that great first line. Where's Papa going with that axe? That's a plot line. It's
Right.
such a plot line. Something's already happened and there's a question and somebody is worried. Fern is worried. What is happening? Why is Dad going to cut the head off some pig here? And I graphed that book out. Something happens in every chapter that leads to something that happens in the next chapter. I think there are 12, 14 chapters, each about 8 pages each. And I thought, I am going to write a book that's built just like this. It's going to have, the same number of chapters, the same number of pages per chapter. There's going to be a question at the beginning of the book. By God, I'm going to force myself to do this. And I gave myself a formula, a shape. And it was kind of like in going back to 12th grade English, and the teacher made you make an outline. I made myself an outline. It consisted really of just one line for each chapter. I allowed myself just one line on a notebook page. Mother and daughter fighting about X. Mother leaves the daughter with her aunt. Daughter and aunt got in a fight. That was my whole outline. And I sat down and wrote that sucker. So I feel like that did teach me a lot about plot, which I still have a hard time applying in both Dear Committee members and the English experience. I also gave myself a sort of trick or conceit in the first one, the shape of letters of reference. In this one, interspersing the students' essays into Fitger's narrative. I just thought, okay, this will help me build something. It will give me a shape. It was sort of, drawing the outline that I then needed to color in. It was a sort of aid for me. Shakespeare requirement was the hardest to write because I didn't really do that. I thought actually started with the shape. That novel began with it was going to be a chair's log. Jason Fitger becomes chair of the department at the end of the first of the three. And I thought, well, in the second, he'll keep a notebook. His ex-wife, Janet, will give him a notebook and say, here, you're going to be a lousy department chair, but the least you could do is write everything down. And she was going to come along and annotate it. So I had this whole conceit, and I made the mistake, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, of sending to the editor the first 100 pages and saying, see, here's what I'm writing. And he said, don't like it. I should not have done that. I should not have sent it to him. But he was probably right. He said it's too much like the first one. It needs to be more different. I think you should write it in third person, omniscient third person. I thought, oh God, shoot me now. So at one point I had 200-page versions of the book going side by side. I was writing
Sounds fun.
2 simultaneous versions. I thought, did I learn anything about plot? No, nothing. I know nothing about plot.
I have done that.
It's a terrible
You
thing.
just want to like run screaming from your whole career.
It's a terrible thing. Yeah. So I feel like I know things about the usefulness of form.
Mhm.
I have, since Dear Committee members, I have written a bunch of short stories in particular forms. I wrote a short story in the form of a board game, which was kind of amusing.
What's that called and where can we find it?
What did I call that? Oh my gosh.
That's okay. That was also
It's a while ago. I'll think of it later.
But as a reader who reads for plot, we started talking about this and then we got distracted, but I really want to talk more about the essays. Did you feel like did you write each character's essays at the same time, or did you write the intro assignment and then how did you do it? And because I really feel like you channeled these characters through I feel like you had to do like a double piece of work because you weren't just creating characters, you were like writing in their writing style, and it was remarkable. And again, you were gentle, but they were hilarious and terrible and wonderful.
Spin was the name of the short story.
Okay.
I remembered it finally. Yeah, and the students, originally I had many more student characters in there, or I would say 4 or 5 more at least, because I thought, okay, if he's going to take a group abroad, logically, the university would want it to be a group 15, 20 people to make their money back, but I could not keep track of that many. It was too many characters. So I combined 2 of them and created a set of identical twins. That was one solution.
Funny.
And another one, I basically have him in absentia during most of the book.
Yeah.
He just sends little missives from places in Europe that he's gone on his own as a kind of AWOL character. And that took care of another. I just kept thinking, how do I knock down these numbers? So that I could, I wanted them to be differentiated. I needed them to be individuals. It was useful to have 2 lovebirds, star-crossed lovers, because that gave a sort of
Star-crossed is giving them too much credit.
yeah, it might be. Yeah, hapless lovers. And but it took me a while to figure out how to differentiate all of them, their voices. I did the audiobook for this.
You did?
Which was,
wow.
It was challenging.
Did you do different voices?
Well, I'm more in the monotone. My husband says, you read in a monotone. I just like more of a deadpan read.
Yeah.
I feel like otherwise it sounds like a young adult novel, which needs more expression to, keep the younger reader involved. But I was reading, there was a guy on the other side of the pane of glass saying, could you give me a little more? No, I need more and more. And I thought, oh my God, I never did any acting, not even in high school. I was never an actor. So it was tricky. And then I would have to remember as the book went by, well, how did I do that guy's voice? How did I do this guy's voice?
Did you want to do the audio?
They even wanted me to do a British accent briefly for, there's a guy who has like 3 lines in the whole novel. He's the sort of super,
the maintenance,
maintenance or super. at the
Do
dorm.
it right now, do it.
I really, it was so bad. The first time I did it, he said, that sounds more like Russian. Just like, I thought, I know what a British accent sounds like. I know how it's supposed to sound. I just couldn't do it.
But did you actually want to do the audio? Did they like, or were you
I
like,
did.
"Stop"?
Well, because they sent me, I don't know if this is how things have happened with you or in your books, but they sent me these voices. Here are
Yeah.
the people, and they had them each read a paragraph. And I listened to them. I thought, that's just not how I envision it. You know, you read to yourself so much while you're writing. I read aloud to myself constantly. This is how the sentence is supposed to fall. And, you know, it's not to say that other people wouldn't have done an excellent job, probably much better than I did, but I wanted it to be the way I heard it
That's
in my
amazing.
head. Yeah.
That's gutsy too. I just wanted to say one more thing about the essay structure. I occasionally had to go back. I thought it was smart that you had the brief intro essays, because sometimes, like early in the book when I wasn't kind of tuned into the characters yet, I would go back to the intro essay to figure out who was talking, which was useful. And then as the characters became more differentiated and more sort of knowable, I didn't have to do that anymore, but I thought that was a good strategy. And more probably would have been too many.
It would have been too many. And Fitger has trouble remembering their names at first too. So he develops a mnemonic for each of them,
Right.
which I confess I have occasionally done that with students. Like,
smart.
okay, that's the one with the, yeah, whatever it is.
Who
Yeah.
writes poems better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I have a couple more questions, but should we maybe toss it out to people?
Yes. Anybody. I don't remember that line. I don't know. How did that come up? Oh, wow.
That's kind of the question I've been trying to ask you this whole time. Like I feel the same way. Like, how did you do that?
Well, for Dear Committee members, I thought, okay, this guy, I want him to have a weirdly erudite vocabulary. I mean, his vocabulary is far beyond mine. So I wrote that with the thesaurus next to me. You know, if I said so-and-so is wearing a blue shirt, I would look up blue. No, because he needs a different word for that. He needs something weirder. I also had a dictionary of, you know, obscure words. I just handed them over to him. So I was, you know, in that way able to create a voice that is not mine. I don't use the vocabulary that he uses in that book.
But where does he end and you begin?
I know it is tricky. Yeah. I used the word, there was one word that I used in that book that even the editor at Doubleday said to me, what is this word? It was yclept, Y-C-L-E-P-T, which I don't even know how to pronounce it
What does
anymore.
it mean?
It means it's sort of eponymous, the like something named. If you had a pseudonym, I could say, you know, Susan Smith yclept Lauren. I may even be using it incorrectly now, but I can't really even define it. I just know Fitger used it. Yes, please. Tell them to go pick up their own copies.
I got you. I was gonna say, they're on sale here. Just wait until the last essay.
Yeah, there's some of them like, you know, probably the student who writes most poorly is Brent. His name is Brent Schraft. And he says early on, I hope we are not going to write during this class. You know, it's a writing class. But he's basically signed up because he wants to go with his once girlfriend. he wants to follow Sonia about. And, even though he can be kind of a jerk and he's borderline stalking this young woman, I still had such an affection for him. He like Fitger, I think, knows he's in the wrong, but he's having trouble righting himself, and he wants to. Hmm. Yeah, he's trying to change too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, I didn't want to be just poking fun at these people. I have huge sympathy again, even for even for Brent or Brent.
I just can't stop thinking about his high school nickname, but we don't have to talk about that there. But if you haven't read the book, there's a reason to. More questions?
I don't have a question either, and I'm not from the academic world, and now I'm going to have to get many books. But my daughter is she's a law professor at the department here in Miami, and starting in 2016 with Paris class, every year she's environmental. She takes a group of students to the science class. And so, I mean, I bought it for her, but I mean, I don't hear about the students so much, but that, really did. Terrorist attack right before they got to Paris. And she was in Morocco, they announced something just won, and the students had to send the students back to the room because everybody was saying, what have you done? Crying, and, one leaves, and, so this whole thing of what the people with these kids are trying to do is I just love how he wrote it. But he picked up, the struggles of the person kind of taking it to, and what's going back on back home with the department, and their own kids back home, school calling, he's in Egypt, now with COVID, students out there, he's isolated, so it's kind of crazy this trip, and even which I just heard, but I thought it just kind of captured this whole thing, so brilliant, so funny.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a friend who's an art professor, and he took students. COVID was kind of over, and I guess it was fall of 22, and they all got sick. And he said, he was supposed to be taking them to art museums in Florence, and he said no, everybody was quarantined in their room, like a whole group of them, and he was going out. He didn't get it. I think he'd already had COVID months earlier, and was just going out and getting food and delivering it to their doors for about a week, and then they went home. I thought, oh, that's the saddest story I've ever heard.
This is going to turn into a quadrilogy.
No. But yeah, I just, again, having done study abroad when I was 19, 20, I really wanted to be on the other side of it, but it's such a different experience to be on the other end of it, leading the group. When you're young, it's like, we're off, adventure, excitement. And, on the other side, it's somebody knocking at your door at 11 p.m. saying, I don't feel well. I don't feel good. Do you have any? I'm like, what? I'm asleep. What's happening? I did try to. Again, that first time when we were in Madrid, it was pretty hard.
'Cause you
At
didn't have
well,
you
we
didn't have
were
a class.
also on this square, the main square in Madrid, and New Year's Eve it was like being on Times Square in New York City. It was just nuts. They were out all night long. I could not find half of them. It was terrible. Yeah, that was not good. Yes. I tried not to read other books in letters at the time because I thought they're going to influence me. But I was really enamored of, it's nonfiction, what is it called, 84 or 64 Charing Cross Road, written long ago, post-World War II. It's a woman who wants rare books from a bookshop in England. She can't find these books in the US. So she, writes a letter to this bookshop, and they mail her the books, and she writes them a check, and goes on for, I think, 20, 30 years, this correspondence. And it's really charming. It's a tiny little book. And I kept reading that thinking, why is this a book and not just a bunch of random letters over 20, 30 years? But the character, the people in that thing just shine through beautifully. So I did read that a bunch of times thinking about how's it glued together? How's it glued together? But yeah, I love essays that have particular shapes. There are a whole lot of essays that are just written in alphabetical order. There's a weird book called Alphabetical Africa, in which the first chapter, every single word starts with a letter A. It's a short chapter. And second chapter, every word starts with an A or a B. And a third chapter, so there are 26 chapters.
Oh my
And
God.
it's a terrific thing. You know, I'm really intrigued by people who can pull that off. So it doesn't just seem like a random exercise, but there seems to be some reason for it. Yeah,
I
it
can
doesn't
see
seem
that.
only like a
Yeah.
gimmick, but it's also something else. Yeah. I like people who get away with a gimmick.
Who's your favorite student?
In the book, who's
Fictional
my
student.
favorite student?
Yeah, not actual.
Well, I do like Xana. Xana, she was one of the hardest for me to pin down.
She's got a real like there's a real conflict with her, which
Mhm.
I mean, they all stand out and there's conflict among and between all of them. But
Mhm.
she has a moment. Maybe it's because it's with Fitger that
Yeah.
seems
Yeah, she and he
sort of special.
butt heads
Yeah.
at a moment. Yeah. He screws up,
Yeah.
as he tends to do. Yeah.
But he screws up, but it affects her sort
Yeah.
of deeply, which I mean I
Yeah.
appreciated.
And I was fond of the twins. They were fun to write. They're both artists, art students, and instead of writing their essays as they're instructed to, they hand him sculptures made out of tin cans. You know, they just hand him weird stuff all the time. And I have a friend, actually the same artist friend who had students have COVID in Rome and Florence. I said to him, you know, I want to draw. I can't draw anything, but I want these people to draw something. And I think it'd be fun if I could actually have drawings in the book that are things that they draw. And I thought he would do a sort of quick Picasso-like sketch, because again, he's a talented guy. And I thought, okay, this is just two undergrad students in the novel who are drawing their own faces. He spent 2 weeks, I think, drawing these things, and they're beautiful. And I have them hanging on my wall at home, and they're about, I don't know, 1 foot square, I guess. In the book, they're shrink down very tiny, so you can't appreciate how lovely they are. When I showed him the book, he was a little disappointed because, you know, they're so small, these lovely paintings he did. And, but yeah, I said, you made them better artists than I was thinking they were going to be. I actually revised some sections to indicate that these twins are really good artists rather than just dabblers.
But that makes it better, I think, that they're serious about what they do and
Yeah,
they're
they're good.
legit.
Yeah.
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 I think I saw him over there. Maybe someone just scratched that.
Yeah, there are words he doesn't like. His ex-wife uses the word relate, and he says, I hate the word relatable. And they argue because she says, I didn't say relatable. I said relate. There are things, you know, he has many, many pet peeves. My sister, she's a technical writer, does all kinds of technical manuals and stuff. She and I send each other posters, billboards, photographs of these things that have really terrible punctuation. We're just, you know, if we ever go out to lunch or dinner together, we both have to open the menu to find the misspelling. Like, I got it first. I found it. Caesar salad. They often misspell. Yeah, can't spell Caesar. Yeah, that's a problem.
I have a friend who used to send me every time he saw weird quotation marks.
Yeah.
Like home cooked
Yeah.
food was one of
I
them.
know. Fresh food. You think, why is it in quotes? Is it fresh or not fresh?
It's not fresh.
It's kind of fresh.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess I did dodge that one, didn't I? Well, I was telling Lauren just before we started that it's hard to. I feel like I'm going through a sort of literary divorce because I've been with this guy for, I started writing him a dozen years ago. It's a long time, and he's just so rooted in my brain at this point. If I'm in a faculty meeting or something, I'm just thinking, fit your thoughts. It's a problem, kind of. But I need to let him go. I need to do something else. So I've just been scratching on pieces of paper. I write everything by hand, trying to figure out what might be the next thing. So
Another dodge.
I know if I could show you like the 6 legal pads full of crossouts, that would give you a hint, but there's nothing firm on them yet. Boy, that has changed over the years. When I'm in my first book, I was writing when my kids were little, just after my younger one was born. And I had sort of an adjunct job on Tuesdays and Thursdays and at night for part of the year. But I had daycare all year round, but I only taught part of the year. And the other part of the year, I basically wrote that novel on Tuesdays and Thursdays over a period of 5 or 6 years. And I got so disciplined, Tuesday and Thursday were writing days, and the other days I just wrote off. You hear these writers say all the time, you write every day, writing is a muscle. I think, oh, for God's sakes, do you have children? Do you have a dog? Do you have a car that breaks down? I don't know who these people are. I've never managed to write every day. Every semester I make up a schedule for myself and then violate it terribly. And it once I'm invested in a piece of writing, then I can be very disciplined and write all the time. But until I get my claws into it, I have to force myself to do it. Oh, sure. Yeah. Sitting around, deciding the refrigerator needs cleaning, rather suddenly something calls to you, the laundry, something will call to you.
You can always tell how my writing's going by how clean my house is.
I know. The house can be
Oh
sparkling
my
some
God,
days.
there's not a dust bunny to be found.
Yeah. So I do try to have a schedule, and I know some writers are middle of the night. I'm not a middle of the night sort of person. I like strong coffee and good light. That helps. She now is big into audiobooks, but she's still not a reader. She does not sit down. She's just she needs to be moving about. She has 30 chickens and lives out in the country, so she's always puttering about with her chickens and listening to books, so that works.
So if there are no more questions,
Yeah.
then
We're done.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.